playing, and then I have my fancy device that knows everything about Haydn. I think I can use one. Is it anybody's edition? I'll just keep it. Good morning, everybody. Let me introduce you Igor Resnianski to the Masterclass. It's so great to be here, and I do have for many years post-nasal drip, so if you see me here doing all of that, I know nobody has it, only me. So just don't think that I'm anything. It's morning, so by the time it kind of gets through, we all know it. Yeah. So sometimes it just makes me cough for like half an hour or so. No, it's a little literally, it's a official post-nasal drip, so I don't want to, nowadays we have to make sure that people don't get too nervous about it. And we'll be on stage without masks, so you're safe. And me and Frederica agreed that we would without masks on stage. So, right. So, and I don't think I guess I have to be connected to the mic to the webcast, which is good. So, I will just let him.
Is there anybody upstairs to let me know?
I don't know.
I don't see anybody from last time I looked.
I can do the Tarzan.
So I'll see if the live stream has started. Is it up or?
Right. That's all right. I came up 30 seconds before. So, please welcome Frederica. Beautiful performance. Love the last two pages. You did create that, I don't know, kind of dark departure feel. So, I'll just have one. Well, as you probably already know me, I don't like to tell people what to do. In general, I like to ask people what they want to do.
Tell me.
You tell me.
But tell me.
Yes, so, but before I tell you what I think I would focus on, a few questions. One of them is on your opinion, because you're your own musician, you have your vision of styles, pieces, and everything. Very general question. An audience can contribute. It's all inclusive. Come on stage. Out of the just standard composer names that you know, which do you think, who can you name? Give the names that their style evolved rather drastically during their life evolution of composing.
Of composing. Well, definitely before Haydn, there would be Bach. And
Did his style drastically evolve when you listen to his late work versus earlier?
Yes and no. His style, he had depth to what he was doing versus innovation.
Right, so on the outside it seemed to be the same, but I'm talking about just radically almost different.
Well, of course, most people gravitate to Beethoven
Yes.
with the sonata form, the symphonic form, the use of the orchestra,
And the language, yes, his earlier to
enrichment of
the
the piano vocabulary
Mhm.
kind of thing, and then you would go probably to Chopin.
Did Chopin evolve drastically?
Yes and no. Again, I think he radicalized what was available in piano literature for content and meaning versus form.
So he stayed again on the outside, more or less Chopin-like, not like Beethoven. Early Beethoven, late Beethoven, you did just two different people.
Exactly.
Any other name? I'm glad you named Beethoven.
Well, I would go probably to Liszt.
Liszt, you're right. Liszt was innovative. It was drastic shift in texture. You're absolutely right. What other name?
So I think after that, probably Debussy,
Yes,
who
from
kind
the
of goes with some of
kind
the
of
earlier.
light romantic to, yes, that would be another name.
Okay. For the moment, I think that's all I can offer.
Scriabin.
True, Scriabin. For me, Scriabin's kind of an outlier because I actually haven't played any of it. I've tried it, I've looked at it, I've talked about it, I've listened to the symphonic works,
Yeah.
and I feel like I know those better than I know the piano works. But definitely, when you look through his whole piano oeuvre, there's nobody else like him.
Chopin-like, and then God knows what.
Oh, but there's
Yes, that's right, that's right. So I believe that Haydn is kind of close to that list. He did not radically seem to be changed, but he changed enough that you can look at his galant style writing earlier, which not even sonatas, like if you look just at the evolution of his sonatas, and later he pushed the boundaries. He was very innovative, and I think that's why Beethoven took, because even though it lasted a couple of years, their mentorship.
Yeah.
So and Beethoven wasn't too happy because Haydn was traveling too much,
Yeah.
didn't pay attention to me.
Yeah.
So let's go to Salieri or something.
Oh, well.
Yes, so
Young
but
people, you know.
but I think Beethoven quickly saw the innovation in Haydn. So, and this is definitely already the piece that is not earlier Haydn galant style, more of the light, superficial writing. So it is already in depth. So that was just my question. So I believe Haydn should be acknowledged. Haydn is an interesting figure. He's there. He is the first of Viennese classical, three, maybe not four or five, but those three. And then it's like, okay, all right. Then Mozart, Beethoven.
Yep.
And especially Beethoven.
Yep.
So, but Haydn, I think he evolved himself, looking at others, but at the same time, I think he pushed development of the sonata form. So this guy contributed a lot. Now, that's general question. We still agree or disagree?
Sean, piano literature class.
Piano literature class, yeah. Well, then the next thing, your personal look at Viennese classical style, which this represents, already developed Viennese classical style, not just in its infancy. What boundaries you as a musician enforcing on yourself, and what freedoms you allow in playing this kind of style of music, which will, let's go with those three. It's practically the entire Mozart, except for some experimental pieces, which, just only few. Right, and then early-ish Beethoven, and then Haydn. So playing that style, which we know of Viennese classical, what is your personal boundaries that you say, Frederica, do not do this?
I don't know that I go so much with don't, but rather given that the focus is primarily on the melody, but also the harmony is critical to the organization of the piece, highlighting the melody, but also giving good support through the harmony. And then attention to detail, like phrase endings, very limited use of pedal, a sense of how your two parts are related as it goes from binary form to maybe like the last one where it's more extended kind of thing. So I would go with the do's and,
The reason I'm staying here, I just want Frederica at least partially face you guys versus I'm staying there and you're looking at Frederica's beautiful head.
So I think if you focus on the do's, then you eliminate the don'ts to a certain extent. If you say limited pedal, then it's clear that you have to be judicious in using your pedal and have a reason.
Was Frederica judicious about minimum use of pedal?
I tried.
We're going to talk about this right now.
Okay. So do tell.
I don't want to tell anything. I just want you to practice what you preach.
True. But again, it is Monday morning.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It is 9 o'clock on a Monday morning in an ice-cold room with ice-cold fingers. So
the foot just goes there.
Something's got to give.
It just collapses on the pedal.
Something's got to give.
So now that you said pedal, and you said absolutely right, you have to be careful about certain things. I have certain specifics that I allow and do not allow in Viennese classical style to myself. And as a result, I impose on my students. And then always say, well, at a certain point, you can do whatever you want to do. So walk the kind of narrow path first and try to be expressive within the boundaries of the style. And then, later if your artistic decision tells you just, the hell with this, I want this to sound different. Or maybe that specific spot in the piece, I want to just change it because I just love it. He's dead, I'm alive, so I can do whatever I want to do. So just do it. But before you're an artist, we are all been, and to a certain degree still basically apprentices. So now that you mentioned pedal, I was waiting for it, so I can strike. All right, so if you're talking about pedal, and now you're fully awake, still cold, but fully awake, can you play the theme with the pedal thing that you were saying? And I'm out of here. Just the thing.
it's a good reminder, because also this is such a big piano
Yeah.
versus what you use in a practice room kind of thing.
And what Haydn used.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, very good. Now, what would you do, skip this first variation, the next variation, knowing that you have to be careful about pedaling? How would you play that? And you can play just half of it. The one that is pa, pa. So you're playing differently right now. You're treating pedal much more cautiously.
Mm-hmm.
So now I trust you that it's Monday morning cold and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Now, even in this variation right now, you had first, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 measure phrase, followed by another 6 measure phrase.
Mm-hmm.
You were much more careful with pedaling in the second half than in the first, even though it's already lighter, better. And I like the second half more, for the simple reason because you didn't pedal over the rests. And you did still pedal over the rest in the first half. What if you did not pedal over the rest in the first 6 measures? How would you play it? Excellent. Is that something that you prefer in that style, in your own playing, or you think, well, that's a little dry to me?
It's a tiny bit dry, but again, now that I'm thinking of it, I can put this pedal down just this much, so in future I could go maybe a tiny bit.
Yeah, that's the compromise I came up with, just because, you know, we want to use pedal. After all the literature that is written after, just like our foot just wants to go there, sink in and give a little bit more sonority, we just got used to it. And the way I excuse myself, first of all, I also use very surfacey pedal that I don't even call it that I'm pedaling, it's an acoustic pedal.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I justify, I say it creates that acoustic effect like here. So that's the effect that I'm going for, so I use a very shallow pedal, which once you actually, when the hammer is not, dampers are not fully detached from the strings. So you get a little bit of the sustain, but the sound drops quicker. And you can find that sweet spot, which has its variations in different instruments or for different, as you know. So that's my pedal. I use it in Mozart. I use it in early Beethoven, a little bit deeper. And then same thing in Haydn, and same thing if you have to play Clementi, Scarlatti, even a little bit of Bach, which you're not supposed to, but you know, you sneak in a little bit. But it's very light surface. I call it acoustic pedal. So it just gives that roomy feel, not the color pedal.
Right.
That okay, very good. So now the next question is Jeopardy today. How did it change the narrative when you start using less pedal or no pedal in that variation? You can play both times first 6 measures, or actually literally first 3 measures. And first with your full Monday morning whole full pedal, and then light pedal. How does it change narrative?
Well, I can mention that one thing you would be aware of is the fact that in the first 3 measures there's rests, and in the next 3 measures it's all legato. It's all connected
Right.
melody.
So if you were not using much pedal and allowing those rests to be present versus not, how does it change the narrative from what the music start telling us first versus the second expressively?
The first one is a little bit like a kind of breathless vocal style, like and then the other is a little more expressive because it's chromatic.
Yes.
Because it's chromatic, and it's chromatic all the way down from like here down to here, so you can follow the chromatic line a little more like that.
So perfect. So knowing that where Haydn lived, when he lived, what kind of instruments he used, If he writes rest, did he mean it? Or he thought that's optional?
I don't know that it would be a rest as in don't play or don't have any sound, but in order to make that sort of vocal effect of breathless, you need space.
So he wanted disconnect. To which degree we can only guess. But he wanted that disconnect to have that breath. Absolutely. So that's being careful about pedaling this style goes beyond just because it changes the narrative.
Right.
And it's up for us. It's comfortable. We just want to pedal gives us comfort, and just the sound that we used to with the romantic literature. We even in, in the 20th century we have to be careful when we go to neoclassical writing. We have to go back to like the pedaling. So very good.
Okay.
Question answers. I have a few more questions.
Do I get any money for my Jeopardy question?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna treat you for a donut. We can go to a donut place. Now, my next question is: we can go back to the theme, and I will jump and play two notes today. If you were looking at the score for the first time without playing it and possibly not knowing the tune, looking at the first, and first of all, thank you so much for the suspended note that you're holding, because I was waiting if you're going to do it or not, and you did. And that nice seventh interval that forms, pristine. Now, looking at, let's say, at the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 measures, you never saw this piece before. You're a musician, you're opening the score, you say, well, that looks like a classical style. There is no hope we can number it, and you can only guess who wrote it, but just looking at the texture, how many voices do you see?
I see 3 voices, occasionally 4.
In the first 6 measures?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6th measure.
6th measure, it's all of a sudden goes into quartet, yeah?
Yeah.
Other,
And
that could have been a fugue.
Suspensions 4, 3, 7, 6.
So basically 3 voices except for measure 6. So now, being a musician and critical of your own playing as others, how would you define 3 voices, not 2 here? Because you definitely have a melody, and then you have an accompaniment, but the accompaniment splits into 2 lines.
Right.
One of them is bass line.
Right.
The other one of them is 2 notes slur, which also, if you follow, create a different kind of narrative, if you don't link them together.
Right.
Sorry guys, you probably don't have a music score. Would it be nice if it was like a screen to project, yeah. What we're talking about, I don't want to play, because I want you to try. So what we're talking about, if you know the music, you know. If you don't, then in this score, Haydn started with 3-voice writing. Yeah, so the melody is obviously at the top, on the top in the first 6 measures. Then the accompaniment has actually 8 notes in the middle, grouped in 2s. There is a slur, 2 notes slur. It's not continuous, or nothing written there. And Henley edition clearly writes 2 notes slur. And then there is a separate stem, quarter notes in the bass. So we have 3 lines. So now let's dig in. Forget about the melody, yeah? For now. If you can use both hands. If you are looking at this, musician as you are, knowing this stylistic boundaries and attention to details and articulation, and be careful in the motivic shaping, which note gets more weight versus less weight. How would you play the left hand? You're welcome to use both hands, and I would strongly recommend you at first. Unless you want to be... So what you're doing right now, you're playing legato between the bass line, and you have this, again, breathless, underneath. So now you have 2 voices. Still have to, You did it on the spot very well. Very good. Now, but I still want you to play hands together and try to make it as pristine as you think it should be with a single hand. And you're again, you're a professional. You switch to playing legato between the bass. Now switch. I would do exactly the same thing. Bass line legato. The inner voice, 8 notes, are separated by that light breath that is implied in the third. Can you use both hands and just play the entire 6 measures? With 2 hands, but
Just the
only the
bottom?
accompaniment
Just the
part.
bottom.
Very good. Now, if you have to, so you're working with a trio or quartet, and you say, violin, have a break with your melody. And you're working with those 2. Maybe the cello and viola double in the bass, we don't know. But, or maybe the second violin just sits and waits until it's A flat and G come. So, how would you prioritize those 2 between each other? Would you give more attention to the bass line, or would you give more attention to the 8th note line?
Probably the bass line.
We must be twins. We must be twins. Why would you do that?
Because that's the foundation of your harmony, which is going to be in the rest of what you're doing, which is going to stand out in the last one when he does all the changes.
I would agree that would be reason number 1. Is there a reason number 2?
Supports the top line.
It supports the top line. Reason number 2 is reason number 3. This lady is like, she doesn't give up. She gives the answer on every question. She would be the best student. Love it. I have my reason number 3, but I don't want to give it away.
Number 3.
If you don't have number 3, say, I don't.
I don't, but I'm thinking of one of the later variations where he has more in the left hand part. But I'm not sure.
My reason is very simple. It's rhythmic. We hear faster rhythm anyway. When you have longer notes moving and we have faster rhythm moving, even if you move the faster rhythm a little bit in the back, we're going to hear it because it just has more notes to offer. So knowing that, can you play it again with 2 hands and balance those 2 in a way that reflect what we were talking about? Very good. I would even be more drastic in having more dimension, space between those 2. And I would you still link in the second note a little bit to the first of the 2s. I would really create that sense of light breath in between. Can you try again? And now to exit, yeah? The second note. And bass. And bass grows. So, now here comes the problem. Can you do it with left hand only? The same thing. And now we need that disconnect. Watch that pedal. I would use no pedal and use fingering to connect. That's a different left hand right now. Now, what if we return the first violin from the lunch break and add to this, but keep what you just did in the left hand? about non-professional. I'm not talking about amateur pianists because they know more than we do. So scratch that. It's just people that just like classical music, like to listen. I think they wouldn't find too much of a drastic difference. Maybe, maybe not. But for professional ear, it makes the whole difference because your texture all of a sudden got cleared. And then all of a sudden, you can hear that southern eighth note line. You hear that foundation line that is more grounded and grows with that intensity as it goes up. And then you have the crime, Pleiadian melodic line. I would be still a little bit more concise in my that little wedge thing, not to pedal over because again, then it basically that articulation goes out of the window if you put a pedal on it. So let me just at least play 2 notes. So my thing, which is that this, see, I was holding you into what I wanted you to do, but I wanted to make sure that it sounds like you did it. And oh, there we go. It's right here.
Sorry, guys. Hello.
For the audience online, if there are only 5 people, so sorry, I didn't realize this is waiting for me here. So what I said, I'm going to repeat right now.
Yes, Igor.
Now it looks like it's not ticking. Not ticking yet. Yeah.
Start over again.
I did it every year, but should you kind of like?
No.
Just kind of like that. Hide inside.
Hello, hello.
You like turn it over.
Hello. All right.
So if I were to do it, and again, from this point, it is subjective. To which degree? That is none of my business. But it has to be to enough degree that anybody can recognize that you made those changes, or you mean what you. So it's. And then here I would give. So it lasts to have that 7th. And then that's a separate conversation. That phrasing dynamic, that's a long-term dynamic. Are you playing it in? So that's we might touch up on that because right now we were talking about clearing the texture, trying to go from what we believe is stylistically more appropriate use of pedal, articulation, that clears the narrative, and have 3 voices versus 2. We talked about a little bit of the motivic micro-shaping, if we call it, but then there is a phrasing dynamic. 5 minutes left? So, I usually, in general, in a masterclass, I personally don't always, or most of the time, I don't go from the beginning to the end because there is no point. It's just like, from my perspective, I mean, there is point, but for my, just like, I think this, the concept has to be done, and then you go with that and redesign everything that you've done. Yes, that's right. So basically, if you look through the entire set of variations, it's you will probably say, well, wait a minute, I want to have 3 voices now, and even in the spots like this. It just clears the texture immediately. You can hear everything. Doesn't matter if the 8 notes are lighter. We still hear them. We appreciate them more. And that long note. That style, just like what we're going to hear in Schubert in the next piece, one small change is a big change. Just one note goes a little bit in a different direction, or you add, instead of 3 notes, all of a sudden you have 4, and sonority change. So, and that's the other complexity in that kind of seem to be simple texture. Small changes brings big difference. If you can hear it and if you can deliver it through the basically balancing the sound. So then this, when you have the top voice is bleeding, and this does the opposite. So it's not always the top voice demands in some, which phrasing dynamic we're going to favor. The bass line is definitely giving us quite a bit of interest. That's bleeding. This is every slight harmonic change from the intense harmony to resolve to for a second in the major. If you clear the pedal, you all of a sudden start to hear it. So, and later, I mean, first of all, congratulations and kudos on this 20s and 19s that you handled very well. This is. I looked at this last night and like, oh, I'm not playing this. I will let this lady to deal with. So, perfect. And so, but in the variations before, when you have this, when you have this, yes, it is melodic, but you have 4 notes per 1 in the left hand. So, the subordination between those voices can be adjusted in such a way that that can be in the back. We'll still hear it as a primary, and then still, or if you decide to, sound is chromatic, and you will still hear that melodic line. So what I would do as a just general thing, if you continue working on this piece, I don't like when I would just very simple thing, less pedal or no pedal, and then thoroughly go through all the articulation markings and try to look at them not from this sense of pianistic convenience, because they're not, but from the expressive narrative. And then after that, you challenge yourself, say, oh, Frederica, now I'm going to change my finger in the bass line. Oh, I'm going to change my articulation. Oh, I really have to be careful about that last note under the slur. Oh, I cannot link it over the pedal, over the rest. Oh, none of a sudden, but then it's going to be a different piece. Not comfortable. But I think it will just blossom into that style that is, and you can be expressive within those boundaries because they're actually expressive. So, with that, thank you so much. Absolutely. And Diana's going to play Schubert. And you're supposed to switch something. Yeah? No, Diane, how are you doing? You okay for me not to? to look in Hanley to download it, and it wasn't given to me, which it should be. But you have a copy, yeah?
Yeah,
Oh, it doesn't matter when it
it's
goes.
controversial whether you have the ending or not.
Right, but it's like the whole chunk, and now like 4 pages, I think, are just non-existent in this version. Yeah.
Right.
So, which is wonderful. This is good, you know, like. Right. So, excellent playing. First of all, I like your attention to the score. Oh.
Hello.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always weird that it's kind of. So I do like your attention to the details. You really followed the score almost to the letter, and yet natural and expressive. So this is very, very. I believe it's very important. When the score gives you specific information, we do have to reinterpret it, but we do have to not only acknowledge but try to implement it. Your dynamics that are written there, you were spot on. To which degree can be argued, and I will just give few suggestions. Literally, there is nothing that is it must be done this way. I do like your choices of tempo. You didn't go with the Fly of the Bumblebee version. Great, and you're absolutely right. It doesn't have to be extremely fast. It's not written in 16th or 32nd notes. Yeah. So and yet you have that energy, that invigoration of those triplets there. I like that you're careful with the open sound sections. You give nice full sound, but it's not abrasive. And you're not abrasive musician anyway, so you don't slaughter things on these keyboards. So, but it was just right, and that was wonderfully done. Great change of the flow and pace between this lyrical and the one that is, we can call it energized, touch of dramatic, but yet elegant, so everything that Schubert. Now, let me ask you, because it's not all about me here, it's about you. What is your vision of this piece? Expressive, let's go from expressive.
Expressive.
And it's unfortunately for the audience on the website for all 5 people. Are you comfortable to take this and answer the question?
Okay, is that all right? Well, it starts off, I don't know, I think of horses behind the hill.
Horses behind the hill.
And then they get over the hill.
They get over the hill.
When it gets louder. And,
So,
yeah.
and then what happens?
There's sort of this restlessness. I don't know. It's hard to put into words.
So there are horses there,
it's
and there is a
music.
hill. What are they
It's
doing?
music, so it's hard.
What are they doing during the lyrical part? The horses.
Oh, that's an interlude of
Are they eating?
the horses are off to the side, and it's an interlude where you're focusing on something else. So
Right.
the people got off the horses, I guess.
Okay. I mean, it's an interesting thing. Thank you for giving an honest answer. I mean, it's an interesting thing for us professional musicians, and we have 3 teachers here today in the Masterclass and 1 amateur. When we teach teachers, we go through so much of don't do, don't forget this. We not always, when you go to the dirt of it, we remind about the expression, but we usually don't have time to talk about it, because if your left hand is quiet, yes, you can expressively try to lead the student into making adequate sound decisions, but we often just go with the practical side of it. How much softer, how much louder, slower, this. So we contribute a lot of this. But when you start to switch to the expressive talk, can you define the expression that you're trying to portray in your playing? Not only is it difficult for young students, and we have to teach them how to be able adequately, more or less adequately to describe, and at each level of the student, younger to the more advanced, changes their language, of course. But for us adults, when we teach, we have to describe to our students. And when we play, you're absolutely right. It's an emotion, it's an expression. It's hard to put into a frame of picture or words that are limiting. But we still have to, because we define expressive moments in our life through language. And yes, we define them through internal feeling, which is different from person to person, but we seem to be picking similar words that we label those expressions. I believe if you describe expression, picture, emotion, or combination of those three a little bit more adequately to yourself, you might make some changes in your playing. They might be drastic, they might be subtle, they might be very light, but I think looking for the right description of it, not to box it, but clarify it for yourself. You might say, well, no, I was thinking about horses here. Now let me think about something. You're right, horses are there. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the first thing, you're like, if it's not tarantella, what else, yeah? And horses. So, and then there is a quiet and bright, so they gotta be like jumping over the hill, so otherwise, what are they doing? Why are they quiet? So you establish a dimension, far and close. So horses, not horses, but so a sense of race. It's not settled. It's approaching, sometimes suddenly. And you can just go with more general, because you're absolutely right. How can you box expression into narrative? Well, we have to. Expression been boxed in narrative for quite a few times, because this is how we share it. But I believe when we do it in our practice, in our teaching, it clarifies a lot. When you start working on that level on the piece, and you are, because you prepare this piece so well, and you have good control of it. Can it be a little bit more polished? Yes. Can it be a little bit more accurate here? Yes. 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 So, but you're on that level right now. And I think once you've done all your cross the T's and dot the I's, put the dot, yeah. So, from that point, the logic has to step back a little bit, still there, and then that world of approximate comes in. And that's the expression. That's the emotion, which is hard to describe. That's the hardest part of our work. It's easy, not easy, but it's easier to go with something that you can clearly define versus this is like it can be this, can be that. Now, let's go with the expressive, because you in your playing, you definitely demonstrating it, you showing it. Now, let me ask you this question. There is a spot, I don't have that second portion of it, so it's hard to tell me, but up until that moment.
The second trio.
Yes. Can I quickly glance at it before I start talking? Okay, Yep. All right. And we're done. Okay. I love this part. So, there is one spot in this piece that's marked 3 piano. Where is that? Only one. I just want to check the other part if it had it.
I think is it the transition?
Yes.
Back to the...
Yes. No, it's actually this.
Oh,
Right.
it's that one.
It's that one.
I knew it was one.
One of those transitions.
Okay.
You're absolutely right. It is transition. The thing is that not like the 2 piano is not enough, yeah? He blobs the 3-1. And he gets a little crescendo and then, I mean, this is as not present as it should be. Very hard with our modern instruments to do it. And, but we have to. Because that has to be the only place that is, has to be extremely light. Now, before we go to expressive talk a little bit, you, as clear as you are, as thorough as you are, I would be still a little bit more accurate with Piano, yes, you have to project. Piano is not extremely light dynamic level, but it is light enough. I call it lighter. I don't call it soft. This is a lighter dynamic range level. So it gives you still flexibility to shape melody. Versus forte, which is elevated, it's not extreme. It's elevated dynamic, so it doesn't have to be too bright. But yes, it has to be projected. So, and you do it very well. What I would suggest you to be even more thorough, your forte doesn't start until there. You're anticipating it, which we all do. We know if there is ice cream truck coming, so we're anticipating it. So, can you not anticipate the ice cream truck? Excellent. Now, then that's where it gets hard. I like your right hand. I would buy it as a piano. What do you do with accompaniment when your general dynamic is piano? How far are you going to shove it? Farther. And it's hard because it's fast and you have a lot of notes. It's that level of control, and that's what I was saying. Can it be a lot adjusted, polished more? Yes. Are you ready for this? Yes, you're ready. That will challenge you. But this is difficult. You're doing beautiful work with the melodic line. You keep it in its boundaries around piano. Might be argued, depends on the hall, depends on the instrument, depends on this and that. But you are, in my dynamic vocabulary, you are in the piano territory. Left hand isn't. It has to be, if your melody fluctuates between piano, touch of mezzo piano, maybe bloop of one or two notes in mezzo forte a little bit, your accompaniment, which is non-melodic, non-linear, has to stay in pianissimo. The problem is it's going fast and you have many notes. It's very hard to do. Can you try to do that? Just left hand. And it stays flat, not react on the melody. Just that little crescendo in piano. It has nothing to do with. I was spending hours to practice this because this is difficult. And then I will bump it up to about mezzo forte maybe, and then low range of mezzo forte because we need the right hand to take care of the primary, I call it structural dynamic. Piano, forte, something in between. Did he ever mark mezzo forte here in the entire thing? He didn't. He didn't. And no mezzo piano, no mezzo forte. He gives you, he's very generous with piano, pianissimo, and even touch of three piano. And then he gives you forte and then above. So he treats that middle dynamic range as a transitional dynamic, and he lets you make decisions. So that's a shaping dynamic that the melody in the piano can kind of maneuver. So isn't forte. It can come down a little bit to that mid-range. But he polarizes them elegantly. But he tells you there is a difference between those two. What happens in the middle is transitional. So, can you try again? I can tell you how I would practice this. It will take me 5 years to make it right. And I can tell you how I would do it. But can you try again? Maybe just left hand. And go. You can go slower. Good, I can buy that. It's not exactly pianissimo. It takes a while to get there. Now, add your right hand and play up to forte and maybe stop maybe in the second measure of F.
Okay.
And keep your left hand just like the way it was. Right. So you're on the right direction to start to separate secondary from the primary. So to which degree it can be argued, but I believe that has to be very light, not too much pedal, because you need that. I like that. I mean, that comparison with horses. We laughed about this, but it's actually right because that sense of race and the clarity of versus so it's not slide, slide, slide. You need the popcorn. That's exactly right. So, and you know, it's Schubert. Yes, early romantic, like classical, go and divide. We tend to think earlier romantic, but it's also kind of still. But that would work well. A little bit less pedal, that light popcorn touch in the left hand, and then right hand does what it does right now. You can try with that. That was very good. Now that's mezzo forte in my.
Yeah.
So let's go to the piano. Very good again. That was nicely done after that. That growth, maybe a little bit more, but I'm a guy, so I like to break things. So you're a lady, you're much more peaceful. So this piano is excellent start. I would give a little bit more. I mean, it's a percussive instrument. We want this to be nice, full, and orchestral, but we cannot. So we have to give that fortissimo right away because you're not going to grow. Orchestra can do, and we cannot. Once we punch, that's all we get. But I would grow a little bit more. Have you ever climbed the trees? Mm-hmm. Good, so just do it. Very good. To avoid thickness in Schubert and any composer that doesn't really want you to be too abrasive, even in this kind of dynamic punch, a little bit less of the center in the chord. And I like that what you did here, and it did sound actually lighter than what you had here. But your general dynamic here was really more of the mezzo forte-ish when you played with that left hand. Now that left hand is reduced, it opened up the space between the primary and secondary voices, so it's becoming more piano. But since your sound is lighter here, you might have to slightly lighten up that pianissimo in comparison to it. Because it's technically, music is an architectural work as well. It's not only expressive, we do have to build the structure with dynamic structure before we start to decorate with so that comes through the expressive thing that we impose on our structural sound, and that modifies it just to the right degree that it's, yes, it's structurally sound, yes, it's expressively convincing. So, can you play pianissimo now compared to your sound? Now, pinch on this pinky. And remember, the second time when it comes back, it's a longer diminuendo. The first time it's ta, ta, ta. No, yeah. This is short one. It's literally the almost like an agagic accent. But the second time when it comes back, not here. Oh, then I'm not looking at the good edition. Never mind, I never said this, nobody saw it. In my other edition, which is not the great, for some reason I couldn't find it handy. It has a longer diminuendo, and I believe Brendel does it in his playing, but I'm possibly making it up. Yeah. Pa, 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 versus ta, 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 ta. So, but I might be dreaming. So, can we go again? Yes. Pianissimo. No crescendo yet. No anticipation of that accent. There is no crescendo. No. Right. Very good. And just right of that voicing would do that little accent. So now, if this is your pianissimo now, what are you going to do here? Yeah. It has to be not present. I mean, it's there, we hear it. Right. Excellent, that's exactly right.
it's an interesting thing. I call dynamic, I divide dynamic into two categories, expressive and structural. They're all the same. They complement in the form and the content. But when you're aware of your lows and highs throughout the piece, it gives us sense of satisfaction as an architectural planning, if you will, because then you see the castle and the biggest tower is where it's supposed to be versus just skyline of tall buildings. But then the low, I would appreciate that pianissimo because I will hear it. My, professional ear will appreciate this, and you're so sensitive to the sound that you can immediately do it. So, I would say I would plan that structural, or think about this at least structural, dynamic planning. Now, the next question for a few minutes, and I will give you one example. And I said it before when Federico was playing, is in that style, since it's so light in texture, we only have, I don't like when you, so many, only few notes per measure. The one note can make a difference. And if you hear that difference, you have to deliver it so that we appreciate it, because your personal satisfaction is good for your living room. If you go in front of the people and you want them to appreciate what you found, oh, that half step down, and you don't highlight it, we're not going to know it. Not that, it's okay, we have other things to enjoy in your playing, but that was maybe something that you wanted to deliver, and it changes. It may create this kind of dark undertone, or it leads somewhere harmonically, or it opens up, and sometimes it's rather sudden, without being Beethoven-like sudden change in dynamic. It's very subtle. So I would look for something like this. Here's an example.
I've got one right there.
Could be there, you're absolutely right. But I'm looking at this. See, after you play the a different day. And after that A flat, he would go. Sorry. Who told him not? Or he could have done it this way, so. By the way, and then the rest, I would personally not brush over it, not, it's. I could see him doing it because he'd done in other pieces that minor major, elegantly kind of juxtaposition. He went with major right from the start. So he was in that mood and he left like that, so he never changed that. Now, but if you don't know the piece, up to A flat, we anticipate minor. So we've been. And it's extremely difficult to deliver it in an elegant, light, with a good taste, that we actually hear, that we're anticipating the minor. Your sound tells us it's going to be minor, but guess what, it's not. And it happens right after technically after the B flat last note. How to do it? Easy to say, but usually you need a time, which you don't have here. You have eighth note and then bar line and another eighth. And that's where emotion changes with the first note in the next measure. What we usually do, we use time for that. We do adjust the sound, but we need time. So that slight delay, pull back in sound, will give us the impression of that emotional change. So if you want to do it, you can do it in slow tempo right now, that transition. But make sure that you go to a minor key at first. You tell, with your sound has to lead us to minor. We've been in that minor right before that. We don't anticipate major change if you don't know the piece. No. But G, you just rolled into it.
Yeah.
I like it. I like what happened after G, but your dynamic stays exactly the same. And I would probably go with probably less. Let me see, because if you it's very hard, and I don't know if I would be successful in myself. So that's right. So it's try again. Delay. Just be late. And then from that point, then you can indulge yourself into a major key. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to do, but I would delay it. Now, let's do a little touch on the major thing. You taking it a little slower. There's a reason for that, because it's andante. Yeah, it's not adagio con moto-ish.
So I don't die here?
Yeah, but do you think he meant for you to fly over right exactly on time, or he said, you know?
I think you can.
Diane, you can be a little free?
Yeah.
And you're doing a good job with those, actually, by the way. So what would be your andante feel in the cut time? Swing versus 4 beats, and they're a little bit more settled. And it's I would go with that flow versus what it was before. In Schubert, I still try not to pedal over rests most of the time. Okay. But that's my thing. It doesn't have it. But even if it's just escaping sound, not completely disconnected, it's still. And 2 and 3 and 4 and. Can you try again? From the first. I know you have 5 seconds left, but sing the top. I know it's a choral. You don't have to sing too much, but it's still. Careful with 3 notes slower. You don't want to accent the last note. Yes. Sing the top, so more wider balance between the melody and. Right, very good, great. Now, very interesting, C sharp D natural. I would voice it. No, I would voice it. So, C sharp has to be a little bit more. And then, right. Rest? No rest. So if Schubert writes 8th, did he think you can do it quarter?
No.
Probably. It just doesn't have to be abrupt, but it just. No, G sharp. Off. That's it. That was good. Same. D sharp. No, see, C sharp to D sharp is it's different. No voice. Otherwise, you're the only one who knows about it. Now, very good. And then for 5 seconds that we have left. Now here, what you're doing here, think about it. You're giving priority to this voice, yeah? Not the tremolo.
Right.
Here you're giving priority to the tremolo. And why? Shouldn't be. Of course. Right. And again, be sharp. Of course. Yeah. Right. So there's another little thing to think about, which is the big. Where's the priority? They sometimes switch from one voice to another drastically. So, and we sometimes go with the right hand. The right hand is not always the right hand. So, sometimes left hand.
Got that nice lead in.
Yes, of course, yeah, because it's right there. It just tells you. So it's. She's a little bit more. Well, the guy is here. And then you get the, then you get the punch. Emotion changes, amount of voicing should change as well. So with those things, if you kind of maybe further explore the details, polish, and nuances, I think it would be pristine. Thank you so much. Are we good with Beethoven right away? Yes. Perfect. Yes, we're doing both movements, yeah? Second, third movement. Good. Absolutely. Nice to see you. Rounds of applause. very much. You also playing the first movement?
Pardon me?
Are you also playing the first movement?
No.
No, I'm not today, I mean, but in general. You didn't look at the first movement yet?
Yes, I did.
You did, yeah, just for yourself, yeah? Good. Well, it's an interesting work. I mean, one of my favorite sonatas, especially last movements. How can you not love that? Very good playing. You, again, I will touch up on specifics. There are two movements to cover it up, to cover up. You are following the dynamics in the score. You're paying attention to the rhythm. And it's essential because you do create a sense of unrest in last moment. So you're not turning into the lyrical piece, which is good, because it's asked for lyricism, especially the main theme, but you're not doing it, which is excellent. You are pretty thorough in the second movement, paying attention to the markings in the scores, sforzandos, subito pianos, which is essential. Beethoven was very, very specific in his expressive marking and dynamic markings. So, and of course you're professional, so you know, we ask our students to do it, so we have to do it too. Now, and then it's always the question, to which degree and consistency? We ask this from our students, and we ask from ourselves when we play. And outside opinion is always sometimes points in certain things that you think you're doing, and in fact you might be overlooking at certain things. So, I like choices of tempos. The second movement, I would probably start a little slower, because when it gets to those 30-second notes, it was a little bit, the sense of adagio goes away quickly as soon as the rhythm gets a little bit more vibrant. So I agree with that tempo, but I would go a little bit slower from the start. General remark, what I would also, I'm gonna try it. What I would be paying attention in the second movement, the timpanis. Most of the time you're absorbing the rest, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes you pedal over, especially toward the end. I would be consistent. Or one way or the other.
Yeah, I have so much conflict with that touch, actually. I like that the dryness at the beginning. Towards the end, it seems like it needs to be a little more sustained. So kind of halfway, should I do consistent or should I mix? Should I not to do it? Because it depends upon pianist, really.
You're absolutely right, but I don't care about us pianists. I don't trust us. Like, we're at the bottom of the food chain. This is orchestral. Second movement, I will be talking to the conductor. What would you do?
So should every time.
Yeah. Beethoven wrote those rests. It's an orchestral writing. It's no brainer. I wouldn't at least try not to be a pianist playing the second movement. I would have to treat my tempos as a conductor. And I would actually, if you take a lesson from a conductor, and work on the second movement, or several of them, because conductors are different, they have their preference as well, but they will give you a more adequate feel of the tempo, rests, anything that is, you good? So, and so I wouldn't think about, should I mix it up, and that's what we pianists do all the time. Not in this kind of writing, not in Beethoven, not in that precise. He used pedal, rather experimental pedal in few of his sonatas, like you probably know concerto. The third concerto, second movement is one long sustained pedal in the beginning. We have to adjust to the instrument of that time, use lighter pedal, or some pianists just don't do it because it sounds too much for them. So if you do halfway, it actually gives you that nice effect. Haydn had a little bit experimental with pedal, most of the end. So from what I know. So if he wants pedaling, he writes. Often he doesn't, it implies. But in something like this, I would treat it as an orchestral score, and it would be timpani, there is a rest in between, that's how the orchestra would play. So they wouldn't mix it up because they cannot even mix it up. It's just the rest, you have to do the rest, or you'll be fired. So
They may helpful.
yeah, I would just do that. I wouldn't mix it up because then I'm acting like as a pianist. So I would be a little bit more pedantic about rests, and that would be the main thing probably. And then the other my suggestion, and that's subjective. When you have these beautiful chordal progressions, you grow in the entire harmony. I would still, and I know in the orchestra brass would play it. They would probably equally grow if there are three of them playing, and they sound different. On the piano, it sounds a little bit condensed. It's three notes next to each other on one instrument versus three instruments next to each other. So I would still, without losing the fullness, still lead a little bit more with the upper voice, or whatever voice you decide to. It gives a little bit more more aesthetically pleasant vertical feel of the, and it actually gives more sense of the brass sounding versus just kind of a little thicker chord piano, I would say. Also be a little bit more specific with sforzandos. And that would be about it, because otherwise, so the tempo is a little bit slower possibly, and then you don't have to be rushed in this 30-second notes later. And rests, you absorb in most of the dynamic, you have those crescendos, subito to the piano, you do it very well. And sometimes splitting the voice, like in this measure, I would show the longer notes a little bit more, so that we hear that there are two voices all of a sudden on the left hand at the end of them, even though the primary is still there. And then a last moment, you're also absorbing most of the dynamic most of the time in your way. I would be just again a little bit more precise with the main theme, because he writes specifically crescendo that converts into diminuendo back to the piano, crescendo that arrives to forte, or crescendo that abruptly ends on the piano, or forte that abruptly ends on the piano. You're doing 2/3 of it, which is great, and you're not playing it lyrically, because otherwise it's the lyrical version will be sound like so. You're giving that sense of unrest. The other questionable thing here, how much pedal or how much not pedal. And then he gives, it's an interesting when it's so specifically written, I start looking at this like, I don't care about how somebody else is playing. I'm looking at the original score, and it tells me that he wanted. He sticks that long note there. It's like, thank you very much. And then, if you have just a long pedal over it, you could still show it with a little emphasis on the long note, but it pretty much dilutes into sonority of the entire chord. Instead of which is very hard to do. And then he wants you to hold all of them. And then he didn't count on the size of the hands, obviously. And then it's, so that amount of detail that he split in one single line into, well, in like at least two voices, or sometimes he has this finger pedaling, tells me how much do I have to use this? Because if I start using a lot of sustained pedal, that will be not present. So it's that, and it's a decision to make. Do you want to? It makes it harder to play. But it's a decision to make. Do I want to at least try to go what seemed to be in the score? And then he was, not only he was the rest, but then you have that the staccato over the slur. With a long pedal, it's not even there. So Before I give up on these details, I would at least try to torture myself to do it. So why don't we try a little bit of each, those little points that we talked about. So let's try to establish the tempo. And you probably want to take your tempo based on the... sorry. Based on this... You were accurate with the rhythm. I was doing this. I was counting. So you're pretty much just right where it should be. Could have been even more precise. I like this escaping pedal. I call it escape. The sound is dropping, but it's not full disconnect. You kind of get your disconnected articulation if you need it. Or if you want to go with smooth connection, it's just a matter of preference. Then not sure if I would go with, and then, but those are details, we won't have time for that. But the tempo, so, do we feel that's adagio? I think it is kind of adagio. So if this is the adagio, 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 and 2 and 1 and 2. Plus adagio is not only just a flow, it's also the state of expression. It's calm. And I would take B flat to the left hand here. So at least we'll have 3 notes sounding. And then that sforzando, you pick the note that you want to sforzando. It's usually single note. Or it's not all of them. And then you have that articulation mark. Rest. Okay, rests tell a lot. If we ignore them in certain styles, we do. But in this style, we're missing out on that, I don't know, narrative. Can you try in that tempo and try not to push it? So it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 2 and 3 and... No, the rest has to start right with the first note. You're slightly overlapping. 1 and 2 and 3 and... Conductors are very good at counting. We pianists, we're not. And 2, and... No, that should be off. Left hand. Yeah, so your harmony should be off. 2 and 3. And keep going. Sforzando, only one note. That's right. No. First of all, yes, crescendo. You don't need that much thickness. It's only within piano. You don't have to build up to a lot of sound. So that means primary voice crescendos more than the secondary voices. You can pick which one, probably the top. And the next thing is articulation. I wouldn't pedal over this. It's so specific. You need a slight if it's not a full disconnect, even if it's a quick one, I call it escaping pedal, for the lack of a better term. That means the pedal is so light that the sounds start to drop noticeably within that length of the note, but it doesn't fully disconnect before you play the next one. But I have this the drop, and that gives me that impression of that breath that it implies there. It's hard to do, but. Maybe it's a teeny bit dry, but I like that more than the pedal over. You could use a little bit more pedal, kind of, but escaping pedal is like a surfacey pedal where they have, every instrument has a different. See, we have the attack sound and then it pulls back quickly. That's the pedal that can satisfy the sonority to a certain degree, but yet do not completely blur the articulation. And you have to hold it there. You cannot move your foot. A little bit less, higher, up, a little up. Yeah, that would work for this. In the tempo, it moves that pedal, and every instrument has a different spot, so it's not guaranteed. You have to look for it. See, I find that is compromise between not being dry toast in the morning with no eggs, and yet have my eggs. So I like this tempo. It's not stagnant, but at the same time, it's not leaning toward andante. You played with close. The flow was at the beginning was a little bit close to. It wasn't full andante, but it was opening the door to it. So that's that. Now, can we go to this? The timpani, difficult part. 1, 2. Are you switching to counting in 4? Here in 16th, because you played pretty accurately. But if you go, let's go from here. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exactly. If you count in 16th, you will be always in bullseye of that rhythm. And if you keep your hand on the key, you're not going to have these sudden spikes of the sound that you don't want. You don't want to. It's da-da-da-da. So count in 16, just basically write for 16 notes and just, yeah. That's right, yeah. And that will give you more precision. You will be aware of the small subdivisions, so you're not going to. The level of precision is his writing. He's writing slur, then he must disconnect, and then staccato after. It's an orchestral, really, articulation even. So we have to try to come close to it. Now, remember there was idea of try to, in a chordal phrasing, still give priority to one of the voices, so it doesn't sound a little thick. So, and by the way, bass, it's not. There are a lot of measures like that, so you want to check. This is sound more orchestral to me versus. But again, this is subjective. Everyone has different aesthetics about everything, so I'm just suggesting here. But same here. Left hand is done. Don't accent the first note of the embellishment. Less of the middle notes, and you will have more sense of the French horns playing it versus piano sounding in chords. And I would be careful with pedal. I would. And then he wants crescendo on a note that doesn't exist. I mean, it's sounding already. That's orchestral writing. Orchestra would be able to crescendo, but he do it in quite a few of his, especially slow movements. He has a long chord, nothing else going on in other voices, and he wants you to crescendo. Ludwig. I can try to do that, but it ain't gonna happen. Yeah. No, because this is a timpani part. In orchestra, they wouldn't just. They wouldn't be da-da-dum. Because, I mean, that means this is one of the. What it tells you, you cannot do anything about it. You're just gonna play this louder. But it tells you that he is not writing for the piano here. It's an orchestral score, even in his dynamic indications. So no, we don't use the secondary voice. No, we do, but not in writing like this. If you visualize it as an orchestral score. So with that, and I want to touch up in the last moment, I would go with a little bit more. So tempo, attention to the articulation, length of the notes, rests. Now with this, my suggestion, at least try, it's challenging. You did all of what you're supposed to do with pedaling, but it doesn't sound like this because your pedal is too much, for my taste. And it obstructs this articulation and that rest. Right, that's exactly right. But then we have to make sound choices that it doesn't sound we hiccup all the time. So we cannot, we should, now, that F is not, and A should not be accented. It's a light shaping toward the downbeat, yeah? We usually shape toward the stronger beat anyway, or longer notes, so, not, oh. That's why it's pick up to the, and it's a light dynamic inflection. You can vary a little bit. He gives you stationary dynamic. He doesn't want you to really grow yet. It's a light shaping changes, so. When one voice arrives to its destination, doesn't mean the other voice has to copy it. This is not easy. Now, and then here. So that's the top of the crescendo. That's the bottom of crescendo. Next one leads you to fourth. That's the top of the crescendo. Thank you. It's a subito piano. As tempting as it is, looking at the articulation, I mean, it can be argued. You can get light pedal over these two measures, or three measures, and get your precision and pointy touch on staccato. You can, but that has to be a very light pedal. No pedal at all, that will depend on if you like it or not. I don't mind, but it's a little dry for to me. So I'm again settling for that light pedal. Smart sound, yeah. My hand is frozen. Only eighth, yeah? Quick crescendo. And here actually when you play it, you are absorbing this rest. But in the second phrase you didn't. You were pedaling a little bit longer. And from this point, there is no dynamic that he left to us. The last thing was forte, and then he gives you almost a page plus with nothing, not even crescendo, I think. And then he gives you fortissimo. So I would basically make my choices of shaping based on the direction at this point. Next one again, next wave. And then brings you to the fortissimo. So, and then the other thing, in the main, I'm jumping over it just because we already are out of time. Remember when it comes back to that entry, this one, after, no, it's not there. Sorry, it's here when the theme returns, yeah, sorry. Crescendos with subito piano. So I'm doing maybe too much of a crescendo, it's up to the discussion. But I would be a little bit more precise because he's so specific throughout that movement with the crescendo leading to crescendo diminuendo back to the piano, from piano on the sides. Crescendo, sudden drop to the piano with no dynamic destination, one can only guess. Crescendo at least 2 forte fortissimo. So, and then amount of pedal. I would just again settle with light pedal. No pedal is seem to be a little dry. Too much pedal is just completely obstructs everything that is in the score. And just find that sweet spot that gives you that a little bit of a sonority but doesn't interfere. I was playing a little fast, the tempo, so it's not. And then pay attention to sforzandos when you have this. It's all piano, it's sforzando within piano, but it should be there. Again, only 8th. Actually, so.
Question. How would you describe sforzando in this context? Because to me, how I learned sforzando is like water in the container, depending upon the place.
That's right, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right.
If it's just soft section, it's not.
Not as bright, yeah, exactly the same way. If I punch too hard, that is because I go to the gym. But in general, yes, sforzando is attached to general dynamic level. So you're absolutely right. So you pick. I call it. It's an unexpected, brighter single note. But depends on within dynamic level you're in. So yeah, yes, absolutely. So when you played that wasn't enough for sforzando. It was very gentle implication, but you could be a little bit more pointy, a little bit sharper, yeah. But it's a complex movement. 2 movements to squeeze in a master class like that would be difficult. But we kind of jumped over it. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can I make a quick announcement?
Yes.
Okay, I know that many of you playing today in the competition. On the board, which I'm begging you to look at, not only the revised private lessons are there, but exact time when you are performing this afternoon, to the minute. We worked it out with the conductor, so if it says 3:34, you are on at 3:34. All right, we're going with that because we have to leave the hall and everything. So please, in 2 places, it says on the front, it says today your schedule for all the performances in the concerto competition, and on the second board it's the same thing just in case you miss it. So please look at the board every day if there's something new up there. Okay? Yes?
Is the website updated?
Sorry?
Is the website information updated?
The website will not have the timing of the concertos, but will have the names of the people as they go on. You are responsible to be there on time. If you are not there, you miss out on the concerto competition. Sorry, thank you very much.
Good, thank you. You would have to teach me how to say your first name.
It's Iran. Iran.
Ira.
Yes.
Okay, because I went on the website to try to how to pronounce that wasn't called for today. You said it's literally Ira.
Iran, yes.
Good.
That's
Did you actually come back from China?
well, I flew from Europe. I've been in Europe for more than a decade, but I originally from China.
But you live in the US.
I live in Europe, yeah.
Because you listed out of China.
Yes, yes. I was originally from China. Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So we're playing this decent.
Yes. I'll see how it goes.
All right.
You have music?
I'll go ahead. And welcome, Iran.
came to the States. I was doing engineering study at Cornell, and then I went to the city. I was in the Juilliard evening division for quite some time.
So what is your profession?
I work in finance.
You work in finance?
Yeah. So
Why I thought you were a teacher for some reason. Yeah. Okay, so you work in finance. So you studied back in China, and then you did you go to Columbia?
Cornell.
Cornell? And then you did a little bit of private lessons, so you took a little bit of...
Yeah, I was in the studio with Professor Zach Burton. He's a student of Fleischer for about 2 years.
So you were thinking to go to music and then you decided against?
No, I was never...
Or just taking lessons?
It's just like a studio lesson, yeah.
So, okay, good. I'm glad you keep it. So this is your first time here?
First time here.
Well, welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
How did you hear about PianoTexas?
It's pretty big for
It's
in the amateur, community.
So you joined the amateur community up there in New York, and you kind of like go there.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Oh, that's right. All of a sudden it appears. So, I mean, if I have to just generally again summarize, we have to break it down into the components when we give some feedback. Energy, great. You're involved physically, you handle it, no problem. You're generally, with cold hands probably, you're doing a great job. I wouldn't be able to even move my hands. The spirit of the piece is there. And I will ask you, what about the spirit of the piece? Your spirit versus my wine. So you are pretty accurate, especially in the exposition at counting. You want to just all of a sudden start to fluff around. So the structure in terms of the metric and rhythmic collaboration, you were very good. If I were to make one comment, just say, what does this guy need? I hear him for the first time. Excellent pianist, he has good skills, and definitely he can play. It would be, but before I tell you what it would be, what would you say, how would you critically look at your performance, see, I only judge you by one performance, and it's unfair. But based on your performance, and maybe in general the way you play, say, this is my shortcoming in that specific area, if there is any. So you go first.
I think there are a couple of things. Like, first thing is
for the audience and the webcast.
Oh, okay. I mean, I guess the first thing is, get connected and get into the performance ready status. Like, that comes more or less after like a few minutes. Like in the beginning, I was feeling uncomfortable, but not connected to the piece. And I guess the other thing is more about like practicing in general is the paying more attention to the details and bringing in like the different voices like more clearly. Obviously, that's during practice session. So. Yeah, I mean, that's all I can think of at this moment, yeah.
Well, actually, we're just about on the same page, not about the feel comfortable because you looked in control right from the first measure you were there, but for us internally to get into and just, ignore everything else, and plus waiting and then sit down and play now. Now, this didn't even cross my mind, you were right in control right from the start. But yes, sound organization. Yeah. You're absolutely right. The thing is that your sound in general has good energy, good drive, your choices of tempos most of the time adequate, you're not pushing yourself to the limit, and that's smart. So that it shows that you have quite a bit of experience in playing. And this general sound organization in such wealth of texture, it's always a struggle, and it comes down to a very simple solution, the balance between your melodic voice or voices, they keep interacting here, and then anything that is secondary. You have except for that 3/4 spot and a couple of climaxes. Even there, you have to be careful. You give a lot of center, or you give a lot of secondary, or not everywhere, but you're giving enough that it's actually becoming a little bit overloaded. Not terribly. I think you can easily adjust it. Even though it's romantic texture, even though there are so many notes, music language comes down to the two elements: melodic that speaks, and secondary voices that can complement that narrative, and the other notes that provides just the background and environment. So once you separate with enough dimension between those secondary and the primary, it opens up the sound immediately. And what it does, first of all, it opens up, it clears things, they're not as dense, but then it exposes shortcomings in shaping. Because then all of a sudden the melody sits there, are you shaping it enough? Are you actually thorough in this horizontal organization? That's all it is. And it's a fairly easy fix for somebody with skills like yours. So let's just go over a few spots. And you're welcome to use music. We're probably gonna flip over just portions, you're not gonna play the whole thing. And that's again, how much, to which degree to balance primary with secondary, it is also subjective. Okay. Some musicians' parents, they like more fullness of the harmony, and sometimes it depends on the style. Definitely this is a style that it wants fullness.
It's already full in the texture.
Oh, right, but it's also kind of, it asks for that fullness, but at the same time, it's a lean. I still look at Scriabin as a lean sounding composer, versus, not that it's a little bit artificial, but Rachmaninoff gives more depth. Scriabin, yes, but he has that, the Scriabin sound has that lean quality in it, almost regardless where, to which dynamic level you climb in, maybe the climaxes. So, if you want to do this, I would have to go to let's just poke around.
Okay.
Can you play the beginning?
Okay.
Sorry, with this thing, it's gonna make a lot of noise. All right. Yep. So this is good. This is very good. You're counting. Thank you for that. Every time you stop on the dotted, on a half note, I know there is another voice that is underneath. The interval expands. Can you still listen and adjust your other voice that it doesn't cancel the long note?
I think I'm listening to the left hand.
Oh, you should.
That's probably why.
I mean, it's a polyphonic writing. It's not. It's a typical romantic, multi-layered, multilinear writing. So, but listen the long note because it loses its sound. And if you give a little bit too much in the left hand, it's not too bad, but it's canceling the long note. Basically, when I'm listening and evaluating the sound of my students or anybody playing, I'm at first, yes, if there's no sound discrepancies, I start to listen to expression. If the sound is not fully organized to, I guess my liking, I scratch the expression at this point. I'm just listening to sound organization. So right now the way you played it's 10 times better. Now, you wanted voicing well that G sharp, I believe? G sharp. All right. Because yes, there is a chord, there is a harmony underneath, but there is G sharp as melodic note. So, and then yes, you have to have T dom on the left and T do dom. It's a linear writing. It's not a block. So, but you have your primary voice.
Right.
And that is the crown of the texture. The rest is supplemental based on your preferences. Can you try again from the beginning? See, like even playing this chord. Yes. Very good. The only time you lost melodic continuity in G double sharp. Keep going, that's good. From A sharp. Right. I mean, yes, you're absolutely right. It is a diminuendo. Now, that's a phrasing dynamic. You are right. It is a diminuendo. But when the voice is still giving you a little bit of that tension going up, you have to react on it. Careful, careful. Listen to the decay of long notes, otherwise you will be spiking. Structural dynamic little issue. You giving too much and you have no room to grow. So his forte here is like mezzo forte technically if you think about it. It's not really even close to be anything. Right. Can you go from there? See that's already too much because see you have another 4 measures to go. And you're given very little room to grow. So just think about mezzo forte and keep the secondary voices lighting here. Dynamic swing, let's say, to the same about dynamic range growth, when the primary and secondary voices are mixed together, it's crowded. You don't get the same effect. Now you have all of that, but you don't have that overload. Right. It can be argued, these 2 notes could have been shown a little bit more, but adding extra little melodic, motivic addition to the primary with the other one staying away, it's a different story versus everything reacting on them. Very good. Now, the same thing that comes in the second subject. It wasn't too overloaded, especially at the beginning it was okay. Pay attention to the left hand, make sure that every note sounds. And you don't have to push it. Another thing is, in general, your reaction on the shaping is pretty adequate. One thing what you were doing here, yes, it climbs up, yeah, it reaches the C sharp. Right. And then it comes down before going up again to reach D, yeah? What you did, probably unintentionally, you start to grow before you reach the low point of the first phrasing gesture. You start to diminuendo, but then all of a sudden you start to crescendo from here.
That's probably not.
Yeah, the next measure is the arrival of that diminuendo, and then you have that quick swoosh to that D. Can you try again? Wait. That was good, but A is not the beginning. It's an and yes, but you were right. But do it again. God muscle. Crescendo up to mezzo forte. So define mezzo forte in the score is not every composer, not in every piece they define that mid-range.
Right.
So he wants you to grow to mezzo forte and then just a single forte after. So from G. See, you can use that's very good. You can use a simple formula. I don't know if you thought about it. If not, then it might clarify. This is a little complicated because it's so linear and polyphonic, but in general, when you start to grow to the next dynamic level, your melody leads that growth. Your secondary voice is staying away from it, and they join close to the, they start to move close to the arrival to the next dynamic level. So they react on it. Then if you have this two-stage growth, same thing happens. The melody continue leading that. Technically we can think about crescendo, long crescendo from piano to forte. But he defines, he wants you to arrive to mezzo forte there. So let's think about this. And we're going to single forte. So your primary melody will pretty much continue with that dynamic growth. Your secondary voices, at least for now maybe, they can stay around piano and maybe grow to mezzo piano, touch of mezzo forte when you arrive to forte, but not more than that. Can you try? Up to discussion, should you show a little bit of a bass? But here, careful. Again, the melody is still guiding everything, so you don't want to cancel the melody with all of a sudden that much growth. Yes, single forte, your fortissimo is here. Yes, you have to grow. And somewhere here, your left hand will start helping. But when it helps, when you arrive to fortissimo, you can still have a pinch of balance separation between the melodic voice and the harmony. You could go right from the forte. Basic rule for the diminuendo, your secondary voices drop in the sound quickly and they drop in it first. Depends on the length of the diminuendo. Your melody still tries to speak and almost stay on the same dynamic level where you see diminuendo. The secondary voices start to step back very quickly, especially if you're coming from the climatic section, like fortissimo. So they immediately opening up the room for the melody to start to diminuendo. If you don't open up, they crisscross each other acoustically, and it becomes again a more clogged sound. So can you try to play that, maybe a couple of measures, go into this poco diminuendo? Treating forte as, again, elevated dynamic. So you can have a little bit, left hand is fine, top voice is fine, just be easy on the harmony. Sound organization goes across all styles. It's not just for this piece. Now, what you can do if you want to, yes, there is a primary voice here, but you could actually get a little bit more interested about the bass versus going with the mechanical kind of reaction. You can actually have it shaped a little bit more. We will hear that pinch and tap. Right. Can you try again? Versus the detached, because see what happens if your articulation is too brief, then the continuity kind of goes to so it's then it's somewhere in between, and then again. Say so, less rhythmically, yes, we keep the rhythm, but we tend to feel the more timing between the notes versus just rhythmically punch through them. Right? And if you orchestrate this, obviously that would be probably brass, yeah? Right. So brass cannot play the way we play, just simply, they could come close, but we just punch, 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 and like, they cannot do the rabbit technique that we're doing. Right. Can you now try to play at a slower tempo, and then don't lose the melody, but appreciate the bass line as a melodic line. Right? Yes, you just basically hold back. So it's like tension from one thematic note to another. And also there is a sense of balance. If you start to mute your sound a little bit in left hand, it does not speak into the. Let me hear from the side. Switch your priorities to the left hand, just in general. Actually, right now, you think you were giving priority to the left hand. No, you just brought it up a little bit. Your melody was still singing, which is nice. And you really, in that situation, you don't need much of the harmony in the middle. You have two voices interacting already, and it's already fairly ample sound and texture. So this is good.
I think it's not a rhythm.
I mean, it provokes you to go rhythmically, yes.
Right.
But the dotted rhythm can be played by trombones also.
Right.
So brass can play it, and they don't play it as quickly as we do it. They have to blow it through it. Very good. Now, let's look a little bit of the development just. And exactly the same thing. You have thematic partitioning here. So you have to be going through half a measure at the time and look at your priorities in sound and measure them one against the other so it doesn't sound too clogged again. Can you try? Yes, it's piano, yeah. That's better. Very good. Very good. Very good. You're careful now with your center. That's exactly what it should be. Now, left hand in that measure specifically, yes, there is a kind of melodic line chord, but it's not really fully developed. It's implied, so you don't have to voice too much in that measure. Chords up, and again, you're going from mezzo piano to mezzo forte. So he's really scribing is controlling your dynamic impulses here. Try again. Exposition, and here then it did not make too much of a difference. That was very good. Can you just play again, but the left hand when you lead into the climax? 4 measures before. Yeah. Right. So let's look at this. Yes, it is. The giant steps, but you don't want to just brush, jump. You do want to hear that distance, and then you have this fanfare. And then it's if you want to whichever you like, but it has to be the time intention that kind of links them together. And of course, adjustment of your sound based on your priority, baseline versus the fanfare, or you include the baseline into that upward gesture. Whichever you want to do, it doesn't matter. Can you try it? Again, left hand. Up there. That was very good. Can you do hands together like that? It sounds much more, not only organized, but more convincing, because the left hand pretty much takes a leading role here, just about. Very good. Now let's go to the next. And let's do you have 2 measures to return to the recapitulation. Can you play them? Good. So that's very good. So you want to try, you keeping this. This is non-melodic, yeah? Non-melodic, yeah? Try again. Well, then you have to be consistent. So you have to. Oh, second careful. It's attention to the half step. Don't lose that growth. Now, actually, you have to delay G and play it a little bit brighter than F sharp. The rest stays neutral to it. Because tension comes with the sound and the time. Yeah, here we need time. Oh, listen to the decay of G. Right. F sharp should be voiced. So basically, for this piece, but that's an example of this piece, in your pianistic arsenal, if we call it, you always have to remember about your the sense of proportions, because you have good, I mean, you have technique, you immediately control it, and you have good oral perception of it. You just have to hear it a little bit with the outside ear, and you don't always need a teacher. You just have to critically listen yourself, record. And if you just say like this, there's something wrong with this. It's like, I don't like it. Just, what's wrong? Well, check your balance first. That's usually the problem. And then once the balance is clear, it's like, I still don't like it. So are you shaping? Are you actually shaping based on those 3 basic rules, meter, rhythm, and direction? Or you're just shaping because it feels like it? Or you're not shaping at all, you didn't plan it? Once you fix those basic vertical and horizontal sound organization, and you have good perception, understanding to which degree you have to do it, your sound texture will be professionally organized. And that's a huge step into sounding professional. And basically you are, even though you're doing something else, your skills are right there. So that's all, not only in this piece, but in general, anything you take. It will be more challenging if you start playing lighter texture pieces, to figure out to which degree, and I don't know how you play, let's say, Scarlatti, Mozart, and Beethoven, you might be more detailed oriented. But this stuff pollutes so much. And it's just, and if you, especially if you have energy and skills like you do, you just want to get to it and just deliver it all, and you have to, ability to hold yourself is a huge thing. Otherwise, excellent. Are you competing in the competition?
Yeah.
What are you playing?
Rahman III.
Very
I
good.
mean, it's a new piece, so we'll see how.
And it's a similar thing. Before you go and blast the dynamite there, just look at the actual long-term crescendos, build up so you don't just completely annihilate Steinway.
Yeah.
Good job.
All right. Thank you so much.
Good luck in the competition. Thank you, guys. You managed to speak until the very end. Thank you. It is cold here.